welcome to yet another episode of the Space Opera Music Podcast, another Star Wars show, or as usual, SOMP for short. And happy SOMP Saturday, everyone. This is such an exciting episode. As usual, this is one of your co-hosts, Ashton, Sherritt, and joined by a co-host, Tim Griesbach.
Yes, sir.
And
Griesbach.
yes, and boy oh boy, we are joined by
There is another.
there is another another co-host. This is a party. We are joined by Dan Schatzberg, jazz pianist and composer. If I'm sure a lot of you watching this have seen the Secura Fan Film on YouTube. That's just a fan favorite, I guess we can say. But yeah, I cannot wait to dig in here. So Dan, an honor and a pleasure to have you on the SOMP show. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely honored to be with you guys. I love your podcast, and I'm super stoked.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So I guess we could all really quick. Dan, you can jump in on this too. Let's talk about our musical experience of the week.
Yeah,
I guess real quick. I guess I'll go first. Which hopefully this isn't like a cop out, but the past week I went back through and I didn't realize that the Secura Fan Film album is like on Spotify, like it's streaming. So I hadn't actually checked it out without the YouTube video, like without the dialogue and stuff on top of it. So that was a very fun musical experience for me. It's now saved on my Spotify and so forth. So hopefully that's not a cop out, but that was certainly my musical experience.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you.
Yeah. Tim, let's have you go next, and we'll have dance.
I have a few again, but the biggest one is actually I'm rewatching The Clone Wars currently with my girlfriend Sabrina, and we have been finishing season 5, which ends with Ahsoka leaving. Oh, major spoiler alert as always, leaving the Jedi Order, and the scene where she gets into the trap in the cell room. And before that, there's a huge foreshadowing of the Imperial March going on. And it's very exciting to hear that, because it's like it's teased and then it's a full blast later on. And that was very new to me. And I was very excited to hear that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Awesome. So, I was watching Revenge of the Sith the other day, and just like anything John Williams, like you're watching, and I mean there's so many you can go. It's like a rabbit hole in music and how it works. So it's just like you could listen over and over and just constantly find new things, and
Yes.
there was just one thing in particular. There was a scene where Obi-Wan finally defeats and kills Grievous. And this is like a subtle thing, but like it's just so interesting how the decision to, because like after that the music could have gotten kind of like triumphant and happy, but it's like it's almost more like ominous and not dark, but like it's still ominous, like the job's not done or so, like just these little kind of nuances and things like that, just kind of really interesting decisions. And I don't know, I love that.
Sweet.
And but I mean, I'm scoring a film right now, and so just kind of working on the music for that as well, and that's been kind of like my musical experiences for the week.
Yeah,
Sweet.
That's an exciting one. Yeah, Revenge of the Sith. I guess before we go any further, Dan, can you tell us where we can find your work? Like I know I mentioned, like Sakura on YouTube and Spotify, etc. But like, where can we find your work? What is your tag, like your username on your social media? Just tell us a little bit about where we can find you, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So Instagram, there's a lot of stuff on Instagram. There's my website. So at Dan Schatzberg on Instagram. from my website. It's Dan S, like Dan's DANS dash music.com. And the dash is important because there's another one. Anyway, it's Dan's dash music.com. And now in general, like a lot of my music that I've written actually isn't publicly available. So sometimes like if you want to kind of DM me or something to find something specific, like I could share it in that way. But but yeah, you typically I would say between my website or I'm on Spotify. A couple things are on Spotify, and I'm very active on Instagram.
Yeah, you are. Awesome. And yeah, as usual, like we'll have the links to all of that in the show notes. So everyone, yeah, make sure you go follow Dan, go check out his work.
Do
yeah,
it.
do it.
Oh wait,
okay.
I have it.
Do it.
We're slowly expanding our soundboard.
I love it.
Thanks to Tim. Okay, well, I guess yeah, should we I know we have some questions lined up, but I also want to like kind of let you lead the conversation too, Dan, like however you see fit. Should we start with some questions? What are you feeling?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. Yeah.
And you guys
okay.
got to, if I get into the weeds, you guys got to reel me back. I can get into abstract mode, and then so just reel me back in if I get out there. Anyway,
right on.
All right, I'm
right
ready.
on. Yeah. So, and this is a question that we ask all guests, but also like specifically like as musicians, I think, and then like me, like a specific like a composer, not a working composer, but like I do write. This is also a question that I think we like personally want to ask you. What is your personal experience with music?
Gotcha. So like, are you like for that? Is it like kind of background, like what I do professionally, or like just kind of everything, basically?
Yeah. So yeah, like I definitely, yeah, definitely talk about what you do, like professionally now, like what you're up to, but
Mhm.
also maybe a little bit about your background, like what got you into music, what, yeah, like your journey to where
Yeah,
you're at now. Yeah.
yeah. So my journey began when I was 3. I loved I loved the Sesame Street theme. I love Sesame Street. And so I had like a little kind of Casio keyboard at the time. And I guess I learned to figure out how to play that theme on the little keyboard. And so I kind of always have been, transcribing and figuring out melodies and stuff. And I started taking formal classical lessons a few years later at when I was 6. And just kind of did that up until up until college. So I was classically trained, but I mean, even during that time period, I spent a huge amount of my time, maybe definitely more of my time, transcribing, improvising a ton, and kind of transcribing and learning different film themes that I loved, and playing around with them, and rewriting things in different ways, and just kind of improvising a lot. Like I really love to improvise. I mean, I still do to this day. And I studied film scoring and jazz at college. And then midway through college, I got picked up by a music production company, like a kind of a boutique music production company, and that works with a lot of the CBS syndicated first run shows. And so I kind of just started writing mainly hybrid orchestral music, all flavors of hybrid orchestral music, but then also kind of other styles as well. Sometimes jazz, which I love because I'm a jazz musician, jazz piano player. My background's jazz, and yeah, I mean, they usually only need that typically, during Christmas when everyone loves when everyone loves jazz. But yeah, I did kind of a lot of electronic music too, just kind of every style, honestly, but primarily I would say hybrid orchestral. And I mean, I still do that to this day. And let's see. Yeah, I branched out a lot more recently. I'm doing films. I'm working with scoring films. Working with a lot of other production music libraries, trailer music libraries, commercials. So just kind of really diversifying my professional portfolio these days and really focusing a lot of my energy into film and collaborating with filmmakers. And I'm working actively on one film right now, and I've got a few others in the pipeline, and just super, I can't share anything about any of them yet, but like I'm super stoked, and I can't wait to share it. It's really exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Awesome. That's so cool.
And you're Los
yeah.
Angeles based, right?
I am indeed.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, once again, a worldwide spectrum of time zones represented
Oh yeah.
on
Yeah.
SOMP. So yeah. Thanks again for making the time.
Oh,
So
my pleasure.
yeah, man, it's like so Tim, you're a saxophone player.
Yes.
Among other things, like, or is sax your only instrument?
If you play the sax in big bands, you need to learn clarinet and
True.
flute as well.
Doubles.
And I started learning piano in like third grade, and that's what was my first instrument. And it flipped between like primary and secondary instrument when I was in seventh grade, I think. But for a saxophone player, play pretty good piano, I'd say, because I had more lessons like until I finished my master's degree as well in piano. So
yeah, I envy pianists, Dan. So I envy you. That would be my instrument of choice if I could like go back. But yeah, I stuck with trumpet of all things.
That's one of the I envy that. Like that's anything brass, woodwind. Those are. I mean, it just takes years to be able to play one note really like and have it sound. So that's
true.
Literally,
it's amazing. Yeah.
Especially trumpet is like it's like doing sports.
Yeah,
you have to train your muscles to get higher and become a better musician because you can play higher and like louder and with the good sound. And when you stop doing it, you get like
the grass is always greener.
Right? not to change the topic really quick, but I was listening to you guys' listening to your podcast the other day, and I heard this like a story I've never heard before about, what was it, the first trumpet player for the John Williams the theme, and that was his first note or his first time ever playing.
Day.
Yeah. So that's a great story.
Yeah, as a trumpet player, I like shake in my boots thinking about that.
I have to drop the name in next episode because it's a huge shame. I still didn't know the name. I have to find that out.
Of the trumpet player, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, true. I mean, dude, if anyone should know it, I should, and I don't. So sorry to whoever that is. Well, yeah, cool. So, I guess then for the Star Wars side of this, Dan, tell us your Star Wars get in story. Like, what got you into Star Wars? Maybe what are your earliest memories of Star Wars? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my earliest memory, I don't even remember how old I was, but like we used to have like this teeny little TV like on top of the refrigerator. Like that, this thing was like, I don't know, 8 inches diagonally or something. Like would not cut it these days.
Like a phone nowadays. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
With like 1,000th the resolution or something, and and I remember watching Empire Strikes Back when I was a kid, and just I don't know, these stories suck you in, and that's my earliest memory of it, and I don't know, I was hooked.
That's so cool. Even on a little like tin pixel like thing that can suck you in.
Yep.
That's so cool.
That is sweet.
So we have a couple of other questions. We have some fan questions actually that we'll end up touching on, I think, just inevitably. So I want to save those. But I think now would be a good time to get into what you'd like to kind of talk about today, Dan. I know you sent us a few clips of your work that we can dive into. So I think let's start talking your approaches and like things that you would like to talk about and point out. And I think we'll kind of veer into these other questions
Mhm.
throughout.
We have to shout out Ray Kenix first because it's her fan film,
Yeah.
and through her I got to know Dan,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
chatted till then, and that's so great that she gathered a group of people to make this work somehow, and you probably playing a big part of it, Dan. So
100%. And it's amazing working with her and Jason. And just,
yes,
I remember meeting Jason for the first time, and just like from the second you meet him, it just feels like you've known him forever. And he's just story wise, just like a powerhouse of ideas. And it's got kind of like this eagle eye view of all of it and keeps all of it in his head at one time. And so, I'm talking with him about it, and we can zoom in like 50 times on a character. We can zoom in like 300 times on a character and just kind of like really go into detail about anything, their motivations or just any aspect of it. And so it just really helps to not only understand the project, but then also kind of just work with him on, the score concept and developing musical ideas for it. So, and Ray, no hyperbole here. She's kind of like a real life Jedi. Every time I talk to Ray, it's like I learned something weird and new that she did amazing that she's done. Like, she's like, she speaks like a ton of different languages. She's like a scuba instructor. She's a musician. She's a good musician. Piano. She's a singer. She actually did some of the vocals for Secura as well. I saw a picture once on Instagram of her rock climbing, and like I was like, I asked her about it. Apparently, she, it was like a serious mountain. This was a serious mountain. And she's a master rock climber. Anyway, basically, she does everything. And musically, she's an experienced musician. So like it was wonderful, when we got into the music to just, I could really kind of dive deep on musical ideas, and we could really kind of go into them, and I could talk with her about it kind of in musical terms. And, she came over for, I think it was 1 or 2 sessions or how many actually, but like, I'm a jazz musician. My process is very improvisatory. And so, I can improvise, Williams style music, themes and all sorts of different devices. And so, when she comes over, like I can, and we did this a few times where, I'll have a few ideas and I can just kind of like dynamically change them and work with her in real time, because she's got that background. I can, change things up, and, if she thinks it should be different in a different area, I'll just kind of like, and I'll dynamically adjust these things and kind of change them in real time on the piano. And I can kind of really sketch things out and offer different options, just kind of real time for her. And, she really just knows right off the bat, like, okay, I like this, I don't like this. And so that works. It worked really well. So major shout outs to Ray and Jason, and super stoked. Like we're working on some new projects right now, and I can't wait to share these things, but I can't talk at all about them right now. So, but yeah, some really exciting stuff coming up. And yes, you had questions about you wanted to go into like the music for it, or what were you thinking?
Yeah. So well actually, yeah, maybe
let's hear something first.
Okay.
Should we?
well, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe let's finish up these questions, and if we end up getting into some like excerpts, we can.
Yeah, okay, sweet.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll finish these up because I also have some like follow-up questions of my own. So yeah, so we want to make sure we get through these, I guess. So yeah, I guess really quick, Star Wars specific, what would you say your favorite Star Wars track is, and why?
I can't give you one. At all.
I love this answer. No, I love
it's
it.
it's a cop out. I know,
Yeah.
but like I'm very partial to the John Williams soundtracks, and I love it all. I mean, yeah.
For me,
I
they are
can't-
always alternating. So depending on what I just watched, it's that is my most favorite score, most favorite like film, and so maybe it's for you as well that you have like this week it was, I don't know, maybe Revenge or I don't know anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like I just love that style, and I love the themes. So it's like, and it's not even like there's one or two good themes. There's so many of them. And so like I don't even know how to you know, force theme over layers theme. Or, I mean, I don't even like, you know what I mean? Like how do I anyway?
How about this? How
Yeah.
about if you know, in like whatever like whatever scenario this would happen in, who knows, but if you could only listen to or like have with you one Star Wars album, like that set of music, like what one movie album, which one would you choose? Like if you had your choice and that was it, like that you could only listen to that.
And I'm on an island or whatever, and I don't have like Spotify
Yeah.
and
You just have one
no
LP.
internet reception.
One LP,
oh
one
boy,
record
oh
player.
boy.
Yeah.
So, gosh.
But you get the whole soundtrack score, which we all hoping for to be released someday.
Okay.
Yeah, like the extended,
The
you know,
extended,
yeah.
the
That's
movie
an
version.
interesting addition. Okay. I still don't even know how to answer. I would be very happy with any single one of them, honestly. Yeah. I don't have a favorite.
Yeah.
I can't. I honestly can't even. I can't even put myself.
Solid.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like
We won't
hand,
force
hand over
you.
your
Yeah.
eyes. I'll pick one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So,
Perfect.
I mean, do you
Oh.
guys like? I don't. Like I don't know. I can't. There's just. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, um, you know, it's taken a lot of thought to like get to this point, because like I feel the same way. But like, if I had to choose, I would go with the Phantom Menace soundtrack. There's just like something, just like the soundscapes that John Williams gets in that one. I mean, you know, it sets the stage for like the rest of the prequels and stuff, but like it's like a slightly different soundscape than the original trilogy, and one that like I don't know, like just the sounds that we get from John Williams and the Phantom Menace are so special to me, and just like so mind blowing to me. So that's the one for me. Like if I had to choose, you know. Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's just not just, but it's added the choir, and we get a whole new sound, like possibility of sounds to get out of that and to combine it with, you know, the OT stuff, and that's one major point of this soundtrack, I think.
Yeah. But also like even like orchestration wise, there are some excerpts that are just like, you know, like whenever they're landing on Coruscant and we get like the, you know, the low instruments like hitting this major chord, like really strongly voiced major chord, but then we get all this like crazy harmony stuff over top, and why does it work? Like why do we listen to this and love it? Because it's so out, you know. But yeah, just like, you know, those kinds of moments I guess are really and like the playful moments, you know, with like scenes that accompany Jar Jar and stuff. Like there's just a lot of yeah, special moments that I love.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, there's also like real developments in technology in terms of like recording and
True.
You know, between, you know, the 4, 5, 6 and the newer ones. So not to say that there's, you know, those recordings and how that's done doesn't sound amazing, but like, you know, there's a different and more clarity, and you can, I don't know, there were huge technological leaps that happened between then that they could really kind of dial that in, I think.
That's true.
You can compare that when you play the main theme of like one of the OT movies and then one of the prequel movies, and this makes a very good impression of what you just said.
Yeah.
There's a pretty funny YouTube video of like all of the main themes happening at once, like all of the crawls happening at once.
Yeah, all the movies actually, right?
Well, actually I think it's the whole movies, but like
Yeah.
just like the first, you know, like first minute or so, it's pretty amazing to listen to at once.
Good. That's good.
Yeah.
I have to end with mine, I guess.
Mhm.
So as I said a few seconds ago, it's always like alternating And because we have this 25th anniversary of The Phantom Menace, and that was the first movie I watched in the cinema and got me hooked for Star Wars, it's probably it these days for me. But in general, I'm totally with Dan, and as we all are, I think I would good with any of those albums to have with me.
Yeah. You
It's
really can't
enough
lose.
stuff to check out forever, and yeah, doesn't matter actually.
Yep.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay. Well, yeah. I guess we'll so we have two fan questions. We did a poll or like a Q&A thing a couple of weeks ago and got a bunch of questions of like topics that people want covered, or like last week we did a deep dive into Palpatine's theme, and it ended up just talking about things that John Williams wrote, for scenes that have Palpatine in them, that are like some recurring things and recurring sounds, which is really cool. So that was a fan submission of like, yeah, like, can you do a deep dive of Palpatine's theme? And so a couple of questions that we got were perfect for this conversation, having a for real life composer on the show. And one of those is from Peter.
Again,
We covered one of his questions previously. But yeah, so this question, he's the way that he worded it is this: going over a basic idea on how a single person can be able to arrange for so many instruments. And so, I guess, like for us as like who've gone through music education and things, like it can be a very simple answer, like you just do it. I don't know, or something like that. But what would you say, like with all of your experience, like how would you describe to someone, I guess, the process of really it's orchestrating, I guess. Like you have your melody or your theme, and then you orchestrate it for like, it's a bunch of instruments, right? So I guess talk a little bit about your approach to that, and how do you as a single person arrange for so many instruments?
Yeah, totally. And so I think it all starts with kind of some organizing and limiting factors of some kind. But let me just kind of like I think of a lot of times I think of music as like a structure. So let me use kind of like a building analogy here, and then I'll kind of
Sweet.
Mhm.
Yes.
take that
Dope.
in. I'll go into music. So let's say you're building a skyscraper, or like let's say you're building the Disney Hall, or you
Mhm.
know, or some large structure of some kind. And then the question would be is like, how are you designing something with so many parts, and like bolts and all these different materials, and so how do you do that? You know what I mean? Um, but like, so just before you even start building anything, it's got to meet different specs. You have a budget, it's like a certain plot of land that you have to, build
Mhm.
in. There are certain amenities, you have to make it to code. So you have to use certain materials, and they have to be a certain strength. Um, and you have to work actively with folks who've commissioned it to kind of gather what,
Mhm.
to maybe dynamically adjust what you're doing, because, there are kind of issues, like let's say weather issues or things as time goes on. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. And then, so you can maybe start off with sketches, and then, of the, so with the Disney Hall or something, let's say you have like kind of a rough sketch, or maybe it's a 3D thing. I don't actually know how that works with that, but that you can present somebody so that they can see what it looks like on the outside. So like for this Disney Hall, you'd have, probably you want something to look just gorgeous on the outside, and then on the inside it's this like beautifully tuned like acoustic environment.
Mhm.
And that's a very specific thing, and you have to design it in a very specific way to get that, and then but then have that kind of beautiful outward shell. And so you start with these kind of organizing and limiting factors, and then from that you can be, present people with, sketches of, okay, so this is what it could look like on the outside, knowing that on the inside, like, you actually have these real specific things that you need to design in specific ways to achieve, like, for acoustics, that sort of result. And so then I guess translating that into music, like, if now, first of all, it depends on, like, if it's a project, something you're writing for yourself, which is a different thing. So I'm just going to kind of focus on if it's like for a project of some kind, like for some purpose, where you're being commissioned for, let's say. So I mean, I guess it honestly works for both, but I guess it depends on like how just for starters, a couple things, like the how specific of an idea the filmmakers have, or let's say what they're looking for musically, if there's a specific genre or style, because those all have different needs. There's different instrumentation that works in each of those categories, depending on, let's say it's you're writing music for a specific scene, you don't want it to be too intense, so you have to scale it back that way. There's all these different harmonies, rhythms, but there's all these different ways, limiting factors that kind of really, once you identify what all those are, then it's like, the decision process of what to write is much, you have much more concrete idea of, you have to satisfy all those kind of requirements to do this effectively. And so then you can kind of really work on how to be creative within those confines. And so within those confines, there's different ways of breaking down musical ideas. And now let's just say, because this is Star Wars, like kind of a Star Wars orchestrational type thing with full orchestra. One of the ways you can analyze John Williams, or just kind of most orchestra, I would say in general, is break it down into foreground, middle ground, and background. And so, like in this, like for foreground, that would be like, let's say a melody, a good melody. And now these can all dynamically change, by the way. It doesn't have to be a melody, but so foreground could be a melody, mid-ground could be like some prominent rhythmic figure that gives momentum, or counter melody, or various things. And let's say background can be like string runs and all sorts of ornamental things, or just adding color in different areas, with different instruments, just kind of background stuff. And so, you typically just operate within the confines of the project, or within the confines of all, everything that I just kind of pointed out. And then you maybe start with a musical device and of some kind, whether it's a melody or whatever, and then you grow it from there. And then so you essentially work your way out. Maybe you can be, now of course it doesn't have to be this way, just many ways of doing it, but you start with kind of one thing and then kind of can branch out from there. And depending on, what these organizing factors are, or different, limitations based on, genre and, how long you have, that sort of thing. You develop something, if you want it to be like emotional in a very specific way, that the decision becomes much simpler in what to do at that point. And then you can, organize things in that way intellectually. And so, a lot of times folks start with like a piano sketch of some kind, and then you can, blow it up from there. Or, many times, I mean, almost all the time, many instruments are doubling apart, which means that they're playing that same note. This happens all the times with Williams music, where he's like, stacking like 4 octaves for a melody part or something like that, with tons of different instruments. So depending on, what, with things like that, because it's a melody and everyone's playing that, you don't have to, you can just focus on, at least instrument wise, what operates in what range and what works well in that context, and then kind of how thick you want that sound to be.
Mm-hmm.
tonally how you want that sound to be. But it's not like, typically it's not the type of thing where, every kind of instrument section or every different instrumentalist is doing different things. So you have to kind of think of it from the bottom up. You definitely think of it from the top down, I would say. And again, not all the time, but most of the time, at least for me. And so that's kind of how I would approach, figuring out how to, organize musical ideas into orchestrating something for for an orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
And to do
awesome.
that, you need to know all of these, what you just said, the ranges of each instrument.
Mhm.
That's what people learn from like studies of any musical thing, but in schools as well. So to non-musicians, every instrument has a certain natural range from low note to a high note, and which is pretty convenient to play. And then there are almost always in the higher regions some parts where the snow is that can be attached on top of that. But it has a different, it's not that traditional to make it sound that way. Is it correct, Dan?
100%. And keep in mind too that one of the elements of writing music in modern times is, and especially particularly when you're writing music, what they call in the box, which is in the computer, is that the rules kind of work differently in the computer. You can break lots of rules in lots of different ways. Like you could extend the ranges of instruments, and you can do many other, like there's many kind of perks to writing in the box. Now there's still fundamental rules that you can't break. So there's always going to be rules no matter what you do. There's always going to, if it's in the box, you have kind of, you can't go above a certain decibel range. And if it gets too, if the frequency content gets too busy in one frequency range or another, it causes what's called frequency masking, and that can cause like give you a blurry or a buildup of frequency in that area that just sounds bad acoustically or for the mix. So there's always rules and constraints no matter where you're writing and how and what context it is, whether it's you're writing for orchestra and there's orchestral ranges, or you're writing in the box and it's kind of digital issues. But another element as well is that you take your average orchestral score, and let's say there's, I don't know, 16 staves or 16 different instruments groups or food groups or however you want to describe them, meaning violins, cellos, French horns, trumpets, blah, blah, blah. And so, you've got let's say, imagine you're writing and you're writing and you have a sketch or however, and you're writing for orchestra, just organic orchestra, and you're keeping in your mind, these 16 different elements, and that can get larger or smaller depending on the ensemble and if there's choir and all these things, but it's typically around that number. That number has gone up to about, like my template's like kind of maybe 1,000 different instruments. So we went from kind of like 16 or 17 that you keep in your mind at one time to about 1,000. Now they all kind of function and they all function in different ways, but you just keep in mind that your palette has increased exponentially. And so, when you're writing, it's just the rules, like the rules are a little bit different because of that, because like, I can, I'm focusing a lot of my energy on when I'm writing something in the box, and let's say it's not going to go to an actual orchestra. I'm focusing a lot of my energy on how to get it to sound really good, really clean, really real. And to give it a real organic component to it. I want the mix to sound great. Obviously, the music and like I want it to. I mean, obviously, I want the music to sound amazing. I want people to listen to it and love the music of it by itself. But like, I'm also going to be spending a lot of my time, and a lot of my workflow and creative workflow even goes toward, grouping different musical elements in different ways and using kind of the tools in the computer to create a certain sound, and be creative as much as I can using kind of these digital tools. But you have just so many more tools, an exponentially larger palette these days, and you can use them in a ton of different creative ways. And you know, I mean, I can extend the range of instruments and stuff. Of course, you're still limited to what an instrumentalist can actually do if you're using a real orchestra, and a lot of times you actually blend synth orchestra and live orchestra together. So that's very, very common as well. So there's a lot of components to it. But yes, 100% right. You know, ranges with when you're dealing with an organic orchestra are a limitation, and if you're writing in the box as well in the computer, and you know that going to orchestra, you have to work within those limitations as well. But at the same time, you can break a ton of different rules that you couldn't typically break, you know, in the past, just because, you know, the software and has just given an exponential amount of creative, you have an exponentially larger palette and just much more creative ability to, you know, your imagination is kind of the limiting factor.
It depends actually on the request. So what has to be done depends on how you can exploit on those what you just said in the box, computerish mechanisms or not. So when the job is to write for real musicians, it has to be different than when you write in a computer.
100%.
Or there are some hybrid stuff going on as well, I think. So with actual recordings, and on top of that, like afterwards, additions from the computer.
Yeah, 100%. Again, 100%, Tim. And if I could, I actually wanted to add a little bit to it. You can't ever replace what an actual orchestra, what actual musicians do with, you know, what software can. I mean, they're different animals. And you know, the workflow for writing for an actual orchestra is definitely different than the workflow for writing, like if it's going to be you know, you're going to be function just completely in the box, and then that's going to also be different than if it's going to be a hybrid of in the box and orchestra. And so just to kind of elaborate briefly on that, so with software, you can it's you know, you have much more, you can break certain rules, you have more range and stuff, but like, you know, but you know, there are definite strengths and weaknesses to software instruments and what the software can do. So most of how composers have adapted to that is they actually cater what they're writing, and you play to the strengths of the software, which, so that kind of establishes its own rule set in and of itself, even though they're loose. But there are definite strengths to what you can do with the software, and you know, and so yeah, these days most folks, if they're writing just something in the box or just using the computer, you cater to those strengths to get the best possible sound, the best quality of what you're doing. But a lot of times, musical idea wise, that's not that doesn't give you the most options. When you're working with an actual orchestra, you can do all sorts of these really interesting technical phrases and things that would take so like 5 or 6 times as long, maybe, or it would just be much harder to implement in the box. And so your workflow and how you write for it can be fundamentally different. And then you add on top of that, you know, no matter how you perform something, you know, because I track all my stuff software wise in, you know, when I'm recording orchestra, and even no matter how I'm doing that in the box, if I'm recording something for violins or something, I'm never going to get anything to sound as good as a violin player who's been playing since they were a baby, you know, has like 50,000 hours of experience playing their instrument, or, you know, it's never gonna be at that same level. And the software is never going to be 100% what, you know, and it's that kind of 5% extra or that 10% extra even if I can get it close, the 10% extra or 5%, or a lot of times even more, honestly, that a live musician adds that really makes a enormous difference. And so even with all of our technological advancements and software today, there's still no replacement for actual real people, musicians.
Yeah. Yeah, actually that kind of answered both of our fan questions. We had another from Jeremy Blore and Mandalore, from Australia, that guy. His question was kind of going over a how-to series on creating music for a Star Wars setting, that really truly could be a say multi-series thing. But yeah, I guess with all of that in mind, like all of that as a given, whenever you are approaching Dan, a Star Wars project, so like Sakura, for example, um, what is kind of like the first few important things that you do when approaching a Star Wars project?
Yeah, so it's different for every project, but typically, and also my process for Secura was, I'll start with kind of developing concrete ideas of the project parameters, length, medium, that sort of thing. I read the script, I do a deep dive on the characters and all their backgrounds, and specifically with Star Wars, like the lore, that's really important. And then I'll work with the filmmakers to establish an idea of what they're looking for musically. A lot of times they'll have samples of music. Ray had some samples of stuff that she liked, and then we'll do a real deep dive on the story they want to tell, and then how the music can function to tell the story, but then also kind of like, emotionally how they want it to tell a story as well, and how to implement just a score concept that tells that story and can function a certain way emotionally. And then I develop the main themes, and that's usually what I spend most of my time on after that point. But we really do a very big deep dive into the story components of it, and especially with the Star Wars stuff, because the lore is so important. Now, regarding my writing process for the project, typically my writing process, and again, it's different for every project, but like my writing process, one of the things that I do very frequently, because I'm a jazz musician, it's really kind of improvisatory, where like I really work to play around with a lot of ideas until I find things that I like, and then I can kind of organize that a certain way after I've kind of found something that works really well. So and maybe an analogy for that would be, let's say you're a screenwriter, and writing dialogue would be kind of a difficult thing, because a lot of the times the things you'll think of in isolation aren't the things that will actually work and sound organic for like what someone would actually say. So if, for example, you're trying to write dialogue or get into the mind of a character, a process that a screenwriter might go through is that they would record themselves saying something as if they were that character. So it has the same flow speech-wise of what someone would actually say. And then they can kind of take that and play around with it a bit, really polish it up after the fact. And that can kind of give both a precision of an organization of like something that's been really thought out and planned, while at the same time the kind of the fluidity and speech patterns of a live conversation with somebody. And I try to bring that out in musical terms. One of the things I'm shooting for is something that it feels fluid, like something that was improvised but very organized as well, which I honestly, for me, like a lot of John Williams stuff feels like, like an orchestra is its own, and as an entity is improvising itself or something. Like it has this kind of jazz, something's very improvisatory about it, and I can't put my finger on it, but like there's something very I don't know if it's improvisatory about.
Yeah. No, which is that's so spot on, because like for anyone who checked out, we recently did a John Williams episode of SOMP, where we like kind of we kind of dug into the things that inspired John Williams' Star Wars sounds. And one of those things that we talked about was his background as a jazz musician, like his like the first album of his, like if you scroll all the way down on Spotify, for example, like back in the 50s, is this jazz album where he's like playing piano, and he had written the parts for like the trombone section and stuff, and just like that like jazz approach, be that rhythmically, harmonically, but also just like that improvisation aspect to things, like just, yeah, like you can totally, that's something that makes his orchestration so magical, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Did they give you? I'm sorry. Did they give
Oh,
you
go.
like music mock-ups?
What do you mean? Oh,
Like
like temp or something, like kind
yeah,
of
yeah, temp
samples of what they
tracks.
liked.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
no, not exactly. No, no, no. I mean, there was no temp for this, definitely not. But like, uh, we really went into kind of the weeds on like her character, like Isla's character, like,
Mm-hmm.
just direct, driven, strong, elegant, exotic, graceful, like really kind of, talked about different themes that she liked and how they worked in different ways. And that's always like, especially when I'm working with folks for the first time, especially for the first time, like having to develop a common vocabulary of
Yes,
vocabulary of like how do they describe, what
yes.
do you mean by exotic and what do you mean by graceful, and
Mm-hmm.
they can, we can go over different pieces of music, and then I can kind of reverse engineer, oh, like, so this harmony or this sort of thing means that, because like it's,
Cool.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's tricky to kind of figure that stuff out in like just developing the common vocabulary is important for
Yes.
me with a when you're collaborating with new folks. So we definitely did that a lot. Um, and yeah, and then I kind of developed a score concept, and I started with that theme, and worked from there. And then a lot of times, like with that project, the the film itself dictates what would work in different
Mm-hmm.
areas, and then you get notes, and but yeah, there wasn't any attempt for this, but we kind of went over different pieces of music that they both liked and why they like them.
Mm-hmm.
And then really went into depth on that character and kind of, emotionally how to feel when you saw her, and kind of like her
Mm.
struggles and her storyline. And so I developed something kind of with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's
So,
awesome.
so I feel that we need to explain maybe the temp tracks, like the term, to people who are not used to that. So it's actually what we covered in an earlier episode is that like directors or anybody who is in charge of deciding how the music should sound gives the composer like a tune or a common tune or a section of anything to have it just as a sketch how it could or should be. Is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes it could be just samples of things that they like, and it's, a lot, sometimes it's like, in a lot of A-list stuff, and just in general, like they actually have really like uh fully flushed out kind of temp scores for everything. So
Mm-hmm.
you have a very clear idea of, and this is another limiting factor in terms of how to write for how to orchestrate for write for so many instruments and things. Like a lot of times, like
Hmm.
when you're scoring stuff, you have a real specific guide of like this piece of music, they like how this sounded and how this
Mm-hmm.
accompanies the scene. And so, you know, write something using that kind of same ensemble, and maybe,
Mm-hmm.
you have different tiers of how creative you can be with that. But uh so yeah, there's different ways you can use temp in the context of scoring.
So a huge part of your job as a composer for movies or for any visual medium is to mediate between the visual medium and the music, right?
Could you like, yes, but I'm not sure I
So
fully understand.
So it's what you just said. When you work with new folks, and
Mhm.
then you try to find the same words
Oh,
to
exactly.
be
I
on the
get you.
same base, yeah, and then you have
100%.
to get in your studio and to make music out of those words actually. And that's
A
I
hundred
find this
percent.
part very interesting because it is you have to be so professional in your like in your side of the job in terms of music and of writing and on orchestrating all the stuff, and at the same time you have to work with the limits or to with the imagination of the person who's like giving you the job.
100%.
Yeah.
No, yeah, yeah, and it's something that I'm constantly working on, and but I think that just a and the more projects you work on with those folks, uh, the more you kind of get an idea of what they like, what they don't like, how they describe it, kind of the confines of how, because sometimes like, maybe they have an idea of something that would work in a certain way, and and then you come up with something that like, that's kind of thing, but would be, stylistically is actually very different. So it creates that same emotion, but does it in a very different way. Um, Sometimes that can work out, sometimes not. So it's like you develop these things as you get to know folks more. And
Hmm.
but the communication and really understanding how to kind of translate that into musical terms is um I spend a ton of time on that.
Hmm. That's
That's
very
awesome.
cool. That's very cool. And
Yeah.
that's actually why there are always pairs of composers and directors, like Spielberg and Williams or Nolan and Hans Zimmer. It's just because
Hmm.
of what you said. And they appear from time to time in like all the big Hollywood movies, but in small terms as well, I think.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Um, well, yeah, that was all of the questions that we had. I guess with all of that being said, like, um, with the Sakura fan film, um, maybe walk us through some like specific examples with the clips that you prepared and all, and maybe walk us through some of these like specific examples and like your process for writing some of these sections. Yeah.
Okay. And I got a little caveat here is that like I don't typically approach, if I have to, I can, but like I don't usually approach this like theoretically and then develop it that way. It's more like I have a, I feel like, I'll hear something that will work. And so that, and I only bring this up is because like that's how I'm gonna probably go about describing it to you, is that
Cool.
like, emotionally why I thought these things would work, and versus, but we can get to the theory of it as well if you like. So but yeah, I typically start kind of from, either, I don't know, just emotionally kind of, I think that this might work in this context. Anyway, so again, I'm in the weeds here, but yeah, uh,
No, I
happy to
think
answer whatever.
yeah, I think that's how. I mean, it's got to be how John Williams approaches it too, because of how effective his scores are and like how much emotional weight they carry. I feel like that has to be the approach. Like we have all this like theoretical like foundation and like working with your toolkit and stuff, like the technical aspects of things. But yeah, I think after gaining that foundation, like whenever you go to approach what ends up being a successful score, I think that's the approach. I mean, it has to be right.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, especially with the John Williams stuff, it's, a lot of it, because you study how he approached different modulations and things, and like he'll just do really creative things that, don't follow any particular formula. And I
Right.
mean, in my mind, it's he heard that, I don't know, he it creates this kind of complex cocktail of emotion that like, he heard that worked in that section or something. So, um, yeah, but that's not to say that he doesn't also have, I mean, there's different figures and things that he has his own vocabulary and different figures and things that he uses a lot too. But I'd love to find out like what his process is and like what he's doing when he's he's
I know.
storyboard or anyway, yeah.
I know. Which this is such like a sad thing to talk about, but like, he's getting up there, obviously. And I really think we're going to get a lot of footage. Like if I'm not mistaken, I think Steven Spielberg has been like working on a pretty in-depth and big like documentary on John Williams.
Oh,
Am I
has he?
making? Yeah, I hopefully I'm not making that up. I swear I heard that was in the works. That Spielberg specifically is making this. So, like I think, I think we'll end up getting a lot of that kind of like behind the curtain view of things, eventually. But yeah, it's a pretty sad thing to think about. But he obviously he is getting up there, and there's a lot of love for John Williams in and out of the industry. So I think, yeah, I think, I guess what I'm saying is his legacy will only get stronger, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, and keep in mind too, like that he's 90s still able to conduct for like,
Yes.
Maestro at the movie, like he's still doing so. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if he lives to 150 and does like 10 more films or something. Like nothing would make me happier, So
Honestly,
I just got
yes.
tickets for John Williams conducting again the Berlin Philharmonics in June next year. So
it's incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Actually, yeah, really quick, Dan, have you had a chance to see John Williams live?
I have.
Yeah,
It was
cool.
incredible. Just there's a palpable feeling in the, I don't know, there's something palpable in the air. I mean, it was Maestro at the movies, in the Hollywood Bowl,
Yeah.
and maybe half of everyone in this sold out stadium, or I don't know if it's a stadium, what you describe it as, but like half of everyone in there has like a lightsaber that they bought that lights up at night. And so I don't know if you guys have seen the pictures, like Instagram and
Yes.
stuff, yeah. So, I mean, it's like the second anything Star Wars comes up, those lightsabers go on, and the whole place is just
Goosebumps.
lit up. Yeah.
Yes.
But the whole
Man.
time, and there's just something, his themes, there's something so potent about them that just anyway. So I have, yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
And you have been, I wanted to ask it like in the very end, but you have been recently into his, not his, but it got named after him in his stage, right?
One more time. I'm sorry.
You have been at the John Williams stage, or what's it called?
Yeah.
Scoring stage, right?
Scoring
It's
stage.
got three. There's a Sony Pictures Studios, Barbara Streisand, John Williams Music Building, Barbara Streisand scoring
yeah.
stage. So it's got, it's like the Khaleesi, like you just got like 50 different titles for her. Daenerys Targaryen, Khaleesi, first of her name, Mother of Dragons, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, John Williams Music Building, Barbara Streisand scoring stage, Sony Pictures. Anyway, so yeah, millions of names for it, and that was amazing. To be in the room where Jurassic Park was recorded and E.T. and I mean to hear them doing Across the Stars and I mean to the background of. It was a NASA specific event, and and they decorated everything, everything, specifically for the Chandra X-ray telescope, and so there was like space imagery in the background. It was just everything. It was so beautiful, and just being that room or that iconic room that with the acoustics, it was there's nothing like it.
Yeah, that's That's amazing. I didn't actually know. I saw the clip of Across the Stars. I didn't know like what the event was exactly. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's awesome.
That's so magical, being at
I
the same
mean,
place, you know.
no,
Yeah.
it absolutely was. And I mean, that's kind of the way I'd describe that kind of the way that music hits me is there's a magic to it, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, honestly, which I know how it I think we all know like, as musicians how it feels to like get compliments, but really you have captured that in your work. And like if anyone hasn't listened to like the Sakura or watched the Sakura fan film or listened to the music, go do that. But you have captured so much of what we're geeking out about John Williams. You've captured that here, which is like so cool. Like Ayla's theme is awesome. How did you? So I mean, yeah, like we just talked about, I guess, like how you came up with that, like back and forth with Ray and the crew. Um, but yeah, I mean, what is the theme? I guess mean to you? I mean, maybe we can even play it here. But like, yeah, like
Yeah, let's play it. Let's play it.
yeah, should we? Yeah, should we play this little clip here?
Of course.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah, man.
This music makes me smile.
I thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's such a good theme.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean, again, my process for the Star Wars, like I such a like I want just the two things for me that are the defining things for like a Star Wars type thing, are just really strong themes, you know, so I'll spend a ton of time on the themes. And then there's like a degree of sophistication in everything John Williams does. So kind of those two things, like really strong melodies, and then all this underlying circuitry and sophistication that just drives them. And I do my best to replicate that. Yeah, I use those two principles to you know, in my approach to writing, you know, the security themes and the score as well. And I worked on the melody first, and I was using sound design and building instruments as my initial method of adding that degree of sophistication to like the main theme and also other elements of the underscore as well. So so it was kind of a mix of, you know, focusing very heavily. I mean, I always focus heavily in the melody, but focusing really heavily in the melody. And for the sophistication part of it, it would be, you know, just a lot of sound design and really dialing in that element to give it a lot of dimension. And then also focusing again on the melody and motivic elements, and then just doing kind of the more organic, conventional sophistication that Williams adds, whether it's like some complex harmonic movements, you know, modulations, lots and lots of instruments, and layering things in various ways, and hemiolas and lots of syncopation and things at the same time, like, you know, your characteristic Williams stuff. But like, you know, I'll build instruments and I'll do a lot of sound design and things to try to work both, you know, the simplicity of a melody with like just deep ocean of sophistication, because that's how I see, you know, a fundamental element of how John Williams stuff works in the Star Wars world. Well, I guess in general, honestly. But
Yes.
uh, so with her theme, I learned about Twi'leks, and I had images of what she was going to look like. And you know, obviously her storyline, what was going to happen. I read the script. Um, So I came up with this. This was like I had at least with Ray, like I met with Ray, and I had kind of a palette of different themes that I was playing her. Maybe too many, obviously, and then we got to this one, and she was like, "That's it." And so I just took that and ran with it, and then kind of changed it a little bit here and there, but I mean, it's fundamentally the same thing. And what I was thinking about when I wrote this was just kind of how Ray described this character. And I'm looking at a list of keywords here. This is from my original notes when I spoke with Ray, just direct, driven, strong, elegant, hopeful, exotic, graceful. And she's very force sensitive. And so I wanted that to come out in the music. And so then, but for this theme, like, first of all, I have a certain amount of time, because like if you're watching it with the film, like I wanted to get through that whole iteration of that first part of the theme, for Ray's, I'm sorry, for Isla's initial scene, Ray, who plays Isla, and
confusing.
I don't want to get confused here. And so, but then at the same time, I'm working to make that melody operate in between her dialogue, so you can hear everything, and it's not getting in the way. So, and this is what I was talking about before with like confines and things, is that like I want it to work really well with what's going on, kind of operate in the background, but like maybe stand out at parts, but like nothing too crazy. And so my kind of approach to orchestrating was the same way. Like I really, like, I spent a lot of time designing, and it's like horns, but it's like a blend of like, I created some synths and I'm layering them in with that horn sound to give it more of an exotic feel. There's a lot of thickness to the kind of orchestral backgrounds I have there. And, it's somewhat dense, harmonically. I mean, it's not, like there's a lot of let's say the color tones, chord tones, even though it doesn't modulate around too much.
Right. It's not crunchy. Like there's not a lot of rub, but there's a lot of color.
Exactly. And so with Isla's theme, that's kind of what I was going for. And specifically with how I orchestrated it and the tempo of it and the flow of it in that scene, I tried to make it work pretty well with what she was saying, and the context of what she was saying. And then also, within that, there's certain themes and things that I use as well, like pieces of it that I'll use in different areas. Like there's Isla's, kind of, there's like a little motif of, Isla's connection to the force that I use to kind of tie together two different timelines. And, so I sort of approached it from that perspective. But it all just started with Isla's theme, and then I kind of decided how to orchestrate that, and then kind of the tempo of what to do, the tempo of it, how to orchestrate it, and how to have it interact with the dialogue and with the sound effects and everything, once I had the footage.
Yeah, right on. Because I have one cool, like where you have this main theme kind of like plugged in. One really cool version of that is in the end titles, which is always fun to hear. I mean, it's another John Williams thing, like using your themes, like just using them constantly and changing them and evolving them and stuff. So it's cool to just like experience that in, what is it, like a 7-minute fan film, right? Like that's just so fun. But yeah, I guess with that theme in mind, should I play this
Sure.
in titles clip. Cool.
Sure. Love it.
Man, that's so much fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. And like like, so we all, hear the theme there, slightly different like ornamentations going on and stuff. But just, I love like the Star Wars callbacks. It's not like, it's not like,
On the nose.
yeah, it's not like in a straight up lift or something like a copy and paste, but like you get that, I don't know, you just like get that feeling from it. Like it feels like Star Wars, I guess is what I'm saying in
Well,
short.
thank you. I mean, that's
That's
and
probably the biggest
What?
compliment you could give to Dan, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well
Um,
deserved.
well, no, thank you. I mean, and I that's what I was going for. So very much appreciated.
And we've talked about this in previous episodes as well. This whole surfing in between the legacy of Star Wars music and your approach as a composer, and it's so freaking hard to do. And you did it so well. So cannot say it enough.
Well, thank you so
It
much.
it is very hard, and I haven't tried it myself. I will try it hopefully someday, but it's a very hard line to serve, and it's wonderful executed. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess so two things. One, one would be the opening title sequence, which I'll play in a second. That is a perfect example of that too, where it's kind of like like a sad version almost of the opening titles of Star Wars. Like it's very main title esque, but like a sad version of it. Like, how would you say you feel about the opening titles?
Oh, 100%. So let me just tell you again, these are the original notes that I got for how they wanted what they wanted this to sound like. So maybe that gives it a little bit more context. But so I knew ahead of time. This was one of the first things that I had to write, that I had to work with. And so it was essentially for this intro crawl, I knew it was going to be about 19 seconds. So I had to kind of do something Star Warsy, like 19 seconds. And then establish kind of a smooth transition into the next shot. And that transition isn't typically hard, but so I had 19 seconds. They wanted it, take the typical, the Star Wars main theme. They wanted it maybe 70 to 80% intensity as that, as epic as that, like not full intensity. And,
Cool.
and then touches on, kind of one or two elements of like the Star Wars main theme. And then I can develop that basically. And so I just kind of took a little chunk of it and, I guess, yeah, I did make it minor. And just sort of played around with it, but like I want, again, like if it's 50% intensity, it doesn't work. It doesn't sound right if you're just watching an intro call and you don't come in with something, that huge initial B flat or whatever, and there are certain and especially with fan film stuff, there are specific expectations, especially with like one of the most epic intros of a movie in the history of time,
True.
There's certain expectations. And so that made the job of how to scale it back much easier, just because like I can, I know how that works, and I can sort of scale it back to maybe 70 to 80%. But I didn't want to do anything too derivative or anything like that. So I wanted to just kind of really focus on a little piece of it. At 70 to 80%, I had 19 seconds to kind of flush the full, the theme of it out and develop that, and then go instantly into, the desert scene. And, yeah, and that's so, but those were kind of the basic notes that I got in the beginning. So that's kind of what I had to work with. And, that was my approach, I guess, to writing that beginning scene.
That's so sick. Yeah, let's hear like the opening title sequence, and then we'll do like the transition as well in a second. Yeah, it's
So in
just like,
comparison to the like what we usually know is 1 minute or 1 minute 20, and you had to cut it short like to what you said,
So
19 seconds.
that was tricky to figure out how to
Yeah.
kind of just to scale it down, basically. But
right.
yeah,
Yeah, and like capturing the emotional weight of this, what this fan film is depicting, but also have like that, what'd you say, like that fantastical, like hopeful element in there as well, I guess. Yeah, it's just like a really nice mix of things into 19 seconds, which is just nuts. And then from there we have this transition, which is yeah, like you said. So you said the transition, and then I'll play it in a second. But you said the transition tends to be easier, I guess. Would you say that's because it's like, okay, like I have like visuals on screen to like help me, or is it like the transition itself, like it's very standard in a way? Like what would you say? What makes it easy, like in a relieving sense? What would you say?
yeah. So I'm trying to think how to. Well, in most of the Star Wars films, the John Williams one, like that transition, like it usually goes into some kind of augmented figure. I'm getting, into kind of theoretical here, but like there's an established way that it goes from one thing to the next. And in order for this to work as a fan film, and for it to like, harken back to how all those work, like there was already sort of a template of that's something that is very characteristic of maybe not all of them, but many of the Star Wars films. And that's kind of a template for how to do it in those soundtracks. But like I mean, but it's all different. Like for this one, I don't know if I'm trying to think. So I wanted to hit kind of the main part of the melody, and then I guess, but it was a little tricky. The tricky issue of this was how to decompress from it without it dropping out too fast, and so that it can go from kind of that high intensity down to kind of an exploration theme.
Cool.
So, but there's so many Star Wars films that have different kind of methods of doing that, and that's a characteristic of those films. So I can kind of use those as like guides, and because it's a fan film, without copying anything, just, it's a technique that's used for many films. So it makes sense to kind of use that same technique, but it was a little tricky to kind of, hit that intensity point and then figure out how to kind of decompress it, even mix wise, and feel like it doesn't drop off too quickly, and kind of go from that intensity and then scale it back really quickly, to kind of a soft exploration thing. But the techniques of how to do that and kind of the templates for it are already out there, because John Williams does that like on so many movies.
Yeah, that's the easy part, is like you know what this transition should feel like. So yeah, which well, I guess like Revenge of the Sith, I guess is one that's like very different, in that way. But yeah, let's hear this
Oh,
iteration of that.
and one other thing
Oh
too
yeah,
that is that like I did add a little I you know
Easter
I
egg.
yeah there's a little Easter egg in there like when Luke first finds Uncle Owen, there's like a little device that John Williams uses there because like prior to that they're basically in this they're in the desert exploring. So anyway, like the
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Very cool. Okay.
I don't know if you can hear that, but it's
No.
that sort of okay. Anyway,
Bummer.
uh
Bummer.
all good, all good. But yeah, so there's a little Easter egg in Bly's Discovery section.
Maybe I can find the clip from the soundtracks and I can plug it in like right here so everyone can hear it.
Oh, it's in the little the Easter egg thing. It's in
In this
the
clip here.
yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Like right at this transition, right?
A little bit after it. A little bit
Okay.
after it.
Okay. Okay, cool. I'll play it from here.
Okay.
Let's see.
It's like that little flute figure.
Mm,
Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, like right here, right?
yeah, and there was a little I did something like that before, but it was something that anyway, just a little Easter egg because
Very
like
cool.
there's something about that works for exploration and like he used it, so
Yeah.
um uh anyway,
Kind of like mystery in there as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Sweet. Love that. Awesome. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah. Do you have any other um points that we should touch on with like with these clips? That you can think of anything else that you would want to like point out or mention?
Um, Not off the top of my head. I mean, I could, but at the same time, I mean, I could go off on
Right.
any one of these for like hours. So,
Yeah, of
so
course,
I
of
don't know how to
course.
answer that question. But but
There's nothing you must say right now, is it? Or is
yeah,
there?
yeah. Uh, at least with this, like I've got some new ones that are coming up, and I can't go into specifics, but like, so I
Oh,
guess I can't. But anyway, like I'm
Hmm.
super excited about that. But as far as this, I don't know. I mean, I need more like I mean, again, like I could talk about them for hours, but I I can't think of anything
right,
else
right,
to say at the
right.
moment. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We
No, no
tried
worries.
to bring Ray to our show, and she needed some time because there's some development going on.
Ah,
That's
gotcha,
maybe
gotcha.
Some
we have
secrets.
yeah, secrets going on. So
Oh,
maybe
okay,
we have
okay.
some time like later this year to
Cool,
elaborate.
cool.
Yes. We can't break any NDAs.
No, 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 no. So, but no, it's some really exciting stuff coming up, and yeah, really excited.
Yeah. Well,
Sweet.
yeah, Dan, I don't have any other. I mean, I do have like other questions, but they're like so like they get into like the technical like DAW weeds of things, which can maybe just be like a conversation on the side, but yeah, like in terms of like the in terms of like SOMP and like fan questions and just like John Williams geeking out, like yeah, I don't have any other questions. Yeah, I don't know. Can you think of anything, Tim?
No, not right now. Probably after the show's over. But
Of course.
thank you for taking your time, Dan. Thank you for elaborating on your work, on in general your input of John Williams and Star Wars. It's a gem to have it on our show.
Well, it was a pleasure to be with you guys. I absolutely love your podcast, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
Thank you.
an honor. Yeah, thank you for taking the time. We'll once some secrets are out later this year, I'm sure we'll be
Okay.
chatting on here again. So
Love it. Love it.
yeah. Well, everyone, let us know what you thought about this episode. Also, shoot us any other like questions you have, like any other questions that we should ask Dan, in the future. Or any like composition stuff or anything really. Let us know. You can comment, etc. We also have our email address that you can send voice memos or emails to hello there.somp@gmail.com. And yeah,
Make
thanks
sure
everyone
to
for
follow Dan on his socials and listen to his Spotify stuff. And text him if you want to have some more. I just said that. Maybe you cannot offer more, but you said it earlier, I think. And yeah,
DMs are great.
thank you for taking the time to
No,
listening.
absolutely.
Sweet.
My
That's good.
pleasure. Thank you guys so much.